First up is Ruth Henke, Queen's Counsel. We're blessed with two very well-known and very highly respected silks to lead the motion on each side. Ruth practices from 30 Park Place in Cardiff and has a strong, high-level child law practice across the whole spectrum of child law. She's well placed to speak for the motion, and so I hand the microphone over to you, Ruth, and set the clock ticking now. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chair, it's my pleasure to propose this motion today. And we say that the age of majority should be reduced to 16. And we say that for three reasons. Firstly, 16 reflects the age when in a modern society, most have sufficient understanding and experience to make informed choices and to take responsibility for those choices. Secondly, reducing the age of majority to 16 will provide greater uniformity and consistencies of law. Thirdly, reducing the age of majority does not prevent the provision of safeguards and protections from those who need those safeguards and protections. Mr. Chair, there is no one day in real life when a person wakes up and suddenly gains sufficient capacity to make decisions for themselves. In real life, it is a continuum dependent on a number of variables that include context, intellectual ability, and life experience. The age of majority in law, as you will know, is actually a legal fiction. It describes the age at which a person acquires the capacity to exercise all the rights of an individual who is not under a disability. Section 1 of the Family Law Reform Act 69 currently sets that date. That Act came into force on the 1st of January 1970. It reduced the age of majority from 21 to 18. At the same time, it reduced the age of free marriage to 18 and reduced the age that a person had to be before they could make a will to 18 as well. It did not reduce the age of franchise. That was reduced by Section 1 of the Representation of the People Act 1969. Both of the 1969 Acts reduced the age of majority and franchise on the recommendation of the Leahy Committee in 1965. By a majority of 9 to 2, the committee recommended the reduction to reflect modern society. A paternalistic society which protected people until they were 21 was then said to be out of step with the sexual revolution which brought greater autonomy at a younger age, and that needed to be recognised. Mr. Chair, in the past, children had been regarded as the property of their parents and were subject to the rights of their parents over them. But the law, thankfully, has evolved. In 1986, in Gillick, Lord Scarman said that the principle of law is that parental rights are derived from parental duty and exist only so long as they are needed for the protection of the person and the protection of the child. When the Children Act came into force in 1991, it recognised that parental rights are derived from parental duty. Accordingly, it was drafted in terms of a parent's responsibility to a child, not his right over that child. The UNCRC is now incorporated into primary statute in Wales and is taken into account when policy is formulated in the Welsh Parliament, known as the Senedd. In March this year, the Scottish Parliament voted to incorporate the UNCRC into Scottish law. That is a move to right-based law. We accept that the Children Act 1989 and the UNCRC still define a child as a person under 18. But that definition, like the age of majority, is just a legal fiction. It's 50 years since the Leahy Committee reported, 30 years since the Children Act came into force. We now live in a society that recognises children have rights and that encourages their independence. Young people now have access through the internet to the world. That access exposes them to life and to experiences which 50 years ago a teenager would not have had. Some of those experiences are good, others bad, but all inform and shape their maturity and their ability to make informed choices. In Wales and in Scotland, the maturity and capacity of young people to make informed choices has already been recognised by giving 16-year-olds the right to vote in their local and their national elections. It is recognised in Wales and in Scotland already that giving a 16-year-old the vote places significant responsibility on their shoulders. But that is not a reason to take away their ability to make informed choices. Rather, it is seen as placing a responsibility on society as a whole to ensure that young people have the knowledge and the ability to make those choices. Informing and empowering young people is not a backward step. It is a benefit to society as a whole. Political decisions are about the future. 16-year-olds have a future to look to. They know what their future they want looks like. By engaging people at 16 rather than 18, as a society, we raise a politically informed and engaged community better able to make decisions that impact on all our futures. Increasing responsibility actually increases and improves maturity and social responsibility. There can be no greater responsibility than exercising your vote and shaping your country's future. If you're mature enough to do that, then we say you're old enough to have legal capacity and to be recognised as having that capacity. That brings us to the second limb of our argument, greater uniformity of laws. As matters stand, there is a significant variation in ages at which a person can take on significant responsibility. Many responsibilities already fall on those under 16. A competent child before their death can consent to their organs and tissues being used after their death, regardless of their age. It's a matter of their capacity. A child can bear criminal responsibility from the age of 10. They can have a bank account at 11, but not a loan. They can work part-time at 13 and full-time at 16. Provided they earn sufficient sums, they're liable to national insurance contributions. A person aged 16 can consent or refuse surgical, medical, or dental treatment. They can consent to sex. At 16, you can drive a low-powered motorcycle. You can drink wine, cider, and beer with a meal in a restaurant, but you have to wait to 18 to be able to buy it. A child is defined as a person under the age of 18 in the Children Act, but Section 9(7) already states that no court should make a Section 8 order other than one varying or discharging an existing order in respect of a child who has reached 16 unless they are satisfied that the circumstances of the case are exceptional. A person under 16 has the capacity to enter a contract, but those contracts cannot be enforced against them unless they have bought a necessity. A person has to be 18 to secure a mortgage or finance the car. They have to be 18 to buy land or enter a lease, but those under 18 can have a licence. You have to be 18, as we've already said, to make a valid will. Pause there, and we invite you to think of some of the anomalies. A dying child can consent to organ donation if they are sufficiently competent to do so. They can consent or refuse medical treatment, and once 16, that decision can only be overridden by best interest decisions in the court. But they cannot decide who to give their belongings to on their death. They can have sex, work, pay tax and save money in a bank account, but as the law stands, they cannot buy or rent a home to live in. That leaves us to a third string of our argument. It is not necessary to maintain the age of majority at 18 to protect young people. We argue that protecting young people should be about empowering and enabling them to stand up for themselves. When the Family Law Reform Act 1969 came into being, it reduced the age of free marriage from 21 to 18, but continued to permit marriage at 16 with parental consent. At that time, parental consent was seen as a safeguard against abusive marriages. 50 plus years on, the Marriage and Civil Partnership Minimum Age Bill has just had its second reading. It aims to raise the minimum age of marriage to 18. By doing so, it sends a loud message that child marriage is unacceptable, full stop, and that children should not be forced into marriage. It criminalises the behaviours of those who do cause a child to enter a marriage. Mr. Chair, we say loud and clear that no child should be forced into marriage. Those that enter into a contract of marriage must have the capacity to do so without the undue influence of their parents and families who seek to contract a marriage for their own gain. However, we say the route to protection is to empower the 16-year-old to make the informed decisions, and when they do, Society should back their decisions. We say no should mean no, but don't punish the 16-year-old who genuinely wants to get married. They can have sex, they can live together, they should be able to marry. Punish the adult who uses their ability to consent to marriage abusively. Marriage, like voting, brings with it responsibilities to yourself and to society as a whole. The key to enabling informed decisions about marriage, we say, is just like voting. It's education and information to enable those at 16 or 17 who wish to make choices for themselves and take action to ensure their choices are respected. Approaching matters in that way respects the young person's right and their autonomy. Some will make bad choices, but which of us does not know some adult who hasn't made a poor choice of life partner in the past? It's part of life, it's why we have divorce. That adult is empowered to extract themselves from that poor choice. Those over 16 should actually be similarly empowered. The natural instinct of reasonable adults is to act protectively, but restricting risk and decision-making may actually increase risk, not diminish it. The overly cosseted child doesn't know how to make decisions and to protect themselves as they enter the adult world, which will be full of risk. So you say, what about the vulnerable? Well, if by vulnerable you mean those in need of care and support regardless of age, then in Wales the system is supposed to be seamless between children and adults. It should already be based on autonomy and what we call the people approach. There is no reason it shouldn't be the same in England. If by vulnerable you mean those aged 16 to 18 who do not have mental capacity, then the Mental Capacity Act 2005 is already there to protect them. That then leaves those who are vulnerable by reason of circumstance, those who have capacity, whose will is overborne, who are unduly influenced or subject to coercive and controlling behaviour. Where statute does not exist to protect that person, then the inherent jurisdiction of the High Court can and is used. It could be used to protect the 16-year-old with capacity, just as it was used in Southend and Myers to protect the capacitous 98-year-old. The age of majority does not need to be 18 to enable the law to protect those who need protection. Mr. Chair, we say that those are strong arguments for reducing the age of majority to 16, and we commend the motion to this House.